Welcome back, all my favorite coder cats and coder kitties, and those of indistinguishable mammalian and occasionally reptilian persuasion. As usual, this is Becca going by Nightcat or Nightcat's Meow most places online, and I am happy to have you here again for another week discussing Linden scripting language. First off, I want to apologize to you all for falling short last week. I ran into that little snag on the script because I tend to do all of this very off the cuff. I am starting to think maybe I should step up my tutorial game and be a little more practiced, a little more edited, a little less off the cuff and extemporaneous, but then again, that would also kind of change the vibe I've been going for. I've actually been I personally have been happy with the very informal kind of thing, like I'm talking to a bunch of friends. That's really kind of what I want to do. I want to make friends through coding. Um, but if you all would prefer something a little more carefully practiced, a little more carefully polished, a little less off the cuff, speak up on the Discord or in the comment section. I do listen. I do pay attention to these things. Also, we have a little bit of an interesting insight from, whoops, did not mean to pop off of there. So much easier to keep the camera settings right when I stay in proper position. But we have a little bit of info on, there we go, from this. When I ran some tests when I got in, one, I saw it actually processed more names and more data. But I also saw that it registered a few people that showed up that I had not expected. So we have a couple of additional people who have swung by the sim. I actually had no idea this happened, so rather pleased to find out they've been here. Means I might have to step my game of actually having stuff for people to do up a notch. But so this shows it doesn't get entirely locked up on just the preset information. However, it also isn't showing me in the list here, so I'm going to be going through, spending a little bit of time figuring out exactly why that's the case, and hopefully having this sorted out without having a 40-minute video. That's a bit much to ask for you all to sit through, and it basically signs me up for an extra 7 hours of just dealing with the render times and everything else. So hopefully we'll have that good for you. Be back in a few once I've sorted out the problem. All right, I have at least isolated where the specific problem that comes up is. I did this looking it over and ran a test by dropping this third number to a 3. I run it. It actually does show up here. So wherever I have the number that is actually lower, it is appending or adding itself to the end of the list correctly. This means that this section here, I'm sorry, not there, that this section here is actually doing its job correctly. It means that the testing that actually filters which of these to use is running correctly. What it is in fact not doing is running this code right there. The part where it is supposed to go through and specifically insert the new item into the list in the correct location. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at a couple of different ways of breaking apart the existing lists and assembling them the way they need to be assembled. And when I find the one that works, I will cut back in and I will show you how it's done, and we will have a video. So if y'all pardon me for just a few moments, what to you will seem a few seconds due to the magic of editing. And the fact that I'm actually going to stop recording because it means I don't have to scan through several minutes from like 5 minutes to an hour, depending on how long it takes me, a video to find the right spot. It also means my coder cat, my little precious here, my fuzzle muffin, can get the petting she's currently demanding. So I'll be back with y'all in a minute.
Say hello to people. Come on, Precious, say hello to people.
All right, I found part of our problem. Actually, two parts of our problem. The first is that I actually had used the list insert list incorrectly. I actually have to tell it that the list we're making is equal to the new list this is generating. So the reason it wasn't adding anything on before is because down here, when we have the visitor ranked and the count ranked, it's adding something on the end, and it's that list is this list plus the new item. I had made a mistake and not said that that list, in this case count ranked, is the list created by this line of code, which is list insert list count ranked, etc., etc., reviewed previous video, where basically it goes through and says it takes the count ranked list, it inserts the result of check into the correct space in the list, and does the same thing for visit ranked, inserting the name of the visitor into the space in the list based on where it is checking, as it's going through and checking if the number of visits is a higher or lower number than the one that came before it. So that actually put them in the list. But when I initially ran it, it became what is referred to in programming terms as a dumb loop. A dumb loop is code that will cycle infinitely, just doing a thing over and over and over and never stop. They're not particularly useful without some form of exit clause that will tell it to stop doing that at a certain point, or a series of things it will do, and it's just constantly checking to see whether or not it should do that thing. So I had to make one other change. I created an integer counter that is the get list length count ranked, and changed the code down here. X is less than, it keeps on going as long as X, the iteration it's on, is less than counter. Because if I put the get list length in here, then every time it ran the numbers, it would just keep inserting another copy of the same thing over, and it would come back and to the top of the loop. Oh, look, the loop just got longer. Run it again. Oh, look, the loop got longer. Run it again. Oh, look, the loop got longer. Run it again. Because it was constant, the target for it to stop checking this would never be reached. So I fixed that. What we now have is it will run everything, but it will give us, let me use the conversation window, it will enter the data it has multiple times. This one shows up in number 1 spot 3 times. This one shows up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. This one 3 times, and then the last 3 shows up the correct number of times. So I need to go back in and find why it's reiterating these additions multiple times, and this code will be finished. So, one more time, the first mistake I'd made is I was using list insert list incorrectly. We'll take a quick look back at the wiki. Returns a list that contains all the elements from the destination list, the list that you're editing, but with the elements from source, the things you're adding, inserted at position start. So the key part that I'd messed up before is it returns a list. This means that the command will create a list. It doesn't edit a list. It returns one. The result of the command is a list So I had to set it to, and the code example down here actually shows it. Numbers equals list insert list numbers, yada yada, 2.5 and 2.5, so on and so forth. That was my mistake. So I found that mistake. And then the other one is because I was making the list longer, it wasn't able to reach, it would come up to the start of the for list. It would loop back up here. It would, as another iteration, it would add 1 to x, which started at 0. It would add 1 to it because it was still less than the counter number, because no matter how many times it was run, by adding something in, it would have just raised that counter by 1. So this would never finish without a hard stop, which I put here by getting the counter list, the length of the count list, count ranked, before I start running the loop and locking that in. And this is still inside another for loop. So this is why each time it goes through, it's able to pick up the next iteration and go. So now I just need to figure out why it is getting stuck reiterating that particular larger numbers multiple times. It stops that perpetual reiteration at some point here, but I've got to go ahead and determine why it did that, and then we will have this fixed. So we're just about done. I've almost got a video for y'all, and I thank you for putting up with showing some patience with this. You all are actually really a good community. I don't mention that often enough. So I will be back with you again shortly. Okay, found the remaining problem, and it proves your coder kitty, she is a jerk muffin if ever there was one. Alright, the reason it kept showing up multiple times is this section of the code here. It is up here, we're taking, better way to explain it, starting up here, this starts a loop of going through each entry to get the, in here it says visit ranked, integer low, it establishes, is this the lowest number, yes or no? We automatically assume true. Then we acquire the number to check. So integer check equals list to string count, which was the list that contained the count of how many times a given individual had showed up. How'd that happen? And so it pulls the I, which is the placeholder, as we go through the list. Remember, we automatically just hard-coded to check 0 because a list in a computer starts at 0. So we start the loop at 1. So we get down here. It's going through each one of them, starting from 1, or the second entry in a list as a computer would read it since it starts at 0, and continuing on up. This was just feedback to see what to peek inside the script. Then we establish the placeholder that is used in here, and the placeholder to make sure that this doesn't loop infinitely. When we get down into here, this is the check to see if the number we're comparing is greater than whatever number is at that place as it goes through the list of items for the already established, that's already in the ranked list. It then, if it finds that yes, it is higher, it adds the number in that location and then keeps going. Now, I am not 100% sure that putting a return in here won't exit everything. I think it should only exit this part of the loop, but we are about to test and find out. Again, I don't remember every single detail. I just remember how to figure stuff out. Yep, that exited everything. Valuable lesson. So what that means we have to do is we have to remove these from here. so that they don't iterate over and over. But if we just put it down here, then this will go ahead and keep checking. So here's what we are going to do. There's actually, come to think of it, there's actually one simpler thing we can do. And that is if x equals counter plus 1. This should break the loop. It should basically tell it it's met its exit condition. There we go. And that solved it. It no longer actually iterates the... Whoops. That wasn't what I wanted to show you. This is what I wanted to show you. It no longer does what it did here and inserts things multiple times. It runs a single iteration of the loop. There we go. And it actually puts them in proper order. So, with that done, we've successfully fixed the last issues from last week. And that's where I'm going to leave you for now. We will go through in next week and worry about refining the actual time detection a little more precisely. And that's going to involve, one, either narrowing down the time frame, because narrowing the time frame will give you more precise data at the cost of running the checks more often, which if you do it too often will start, or have too packed a sim, will start to degrade server performance. The other thing we'll do is we'll put in a marker that will detect if a given individual was present for the last time it cycled through, because then you're looking at a continuous block or portion of that block. And we will convert the number it stores to be based on estimated portions of time. So you can get a better estimate of the actual total amount of time a given individual spends in the sim. But that's going to be a lot more complicated little bits of math and calculations and a few other bits of jiggery-pokery, so we're going to cover those next week. I try to have these videos out every Tuesday by noon at Eastern Standard Time. And that will be it for this week. So good day, good luck, happy coding. As usual, if you have any questions, feel free to hit the Discord channel or the comment section. I do monitor the Discord channel a little more aggressively than the comment section. Plus, there's also a bit of a community slowly developing there. We've actually had an instance where our own Kizzy has been able to answer some people's questions quite correctly, and even faster than I got on to look at it. So it's a good place to not just wait for me, but to learn from each other. So once again, that's it for now. So good day, good luck, happy coding, and as usual, a hearty, happy meow to all of you wonderful coder cats and coder kitties.